With millions of people infected all over the world and every continent in quarantine, the coronavirus or COVID-19 is possibly the worst single event since World War II. It wasn't always going to turn out this way though. And to truly understand why things got so bad, we need to go back almost 20 years in time to 16 November 2002. A farmer in Guangdong province, China, was going about his standard routine. You know, plowing fields, reaping crops, contracting deadly viruses that pose a threat to mankind. The usual, no big deal, nothing out of the ordinary. And for a while it seemed like that was going to be true. That is, until about a month later, when the first super spreader emerged. Now, on average, each person would infect at most 2 to 3 people. This super spreader, however, infected 30, and they in turn infected even more people. The situation was now clearly out of hand. Finally, the authorities caved in, months after the initial spread, and reported the situation to the World Health Organization. There was going to be a new disease, namely the Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, or SARS. Worldwide, over 8,000 people were infected, with just under 800 confirmed deaths. Fast forward to the present. The coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 began in the 1st of December 2019 in a wet market in Wuhan, China. But of course, this was no big deal. Nothing out of the ordinary. This is starting to sound oddly familiar. As a result of government bureaucracy and a desire to keep their own jobs, the Wuhan government had stopped news of the virus from spreading upwards to the central government. Up to now, the path COVID-19 took seemed in parallel to SARS. As we will soon see though, their paths diverged almost immediately beyond this point. Now, if you've ever played Plague Inc. before, you'll know that the best way to spread a disease is to keep lethality low and infectivity high. Take SARS for example. If you decreased its lethality, you would kill less people, allowing more people to actually spread it. And if you increased its infectivity, well, it would be more infectious. So what happens if we do exactly this? Well, as it turns out, you get COVID-19. Even though COVID-19 is related to SARS, a vaccine for SARS was never actually created. So there's nothing we can draw upon to accelerate this process. But surely, you ask, these factors alone can't account for the huge disparity in the number of people infected. After all, SARS infected less than 9,000 people, compared to several million for COVID-19. And you'd be right. As always, there is a human element. For the better and for the worse. What went right was that the Chinese central government learned from its experiences with SARS and immediately alerted the World Health Organization and other nations of the virus. Soon thereafter, it also published COVID-19's genome. It then instituted the most drastic disease prevention protocols in human history, using the simple technique of quarantining. Now, quarantining the sick is not exactly a new technique. It's been used for centuries as a means to slow the spread of disease. But the difference is that in this case, China proposed to quarantine over 1 billion people, a scale absolutely unheard of in human history. The matter was complicated even more by the fact that it occurred in the midst of the largest annual human migration event in the world, with hundreds of millions of Chinese denizens returning home for Chinese New Year. In hindsight, it appears that the risk has paid off. As of late March, domestic transmissions of the coronavirus has become nil. China had bought time for the rest of the world to prepare. So then, what did the rest of the world do? It was always going to be the case that different countries with their distinct cultures, economies, and healthcare systems were going to adopt different responses. Japan and South Korea each almost immediately quarantined their disease hotspots, enforced national self-isolation, and mandated the wearing of surgical masks. Europe and the United States, however, instead decided that their best course of action was to mount a coordinated effort to stock up on toilet paper. And for the most part, that was their entire initial response. As it turns out, the United States and Europe also learned a lesson from SARS. The lesson of complacency. Believing that COVID-19 would, just like SARS, be confined to China. The West made the fatal mistake of underestimating the virus. Trump dismissed the virus as nothing more than a serious flu. Governments placed the economy before the lives of their citizens. There were also severe shortages of masks and testing kits, despite governments being warned months in advance of the incoming crisis. As a result, well, history speaks for itself. By the time more severe quarantine and social distancing measures were put into place, the situation had already gotten well out of hand. Fortunately, as of the time of making of this video, the number of cases have begun to plateau both in Europe and the United States. Only time will tell if we are truly past the worst of this crisis. But hopefully this will be a wake-up call that sometimes, just sometimes, doing too much is better than doing not enough.